All right. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. It's afternoon here in Baltimore, Maryland. My name is Ramy and Pierre. I'm the Chief Learning Officer with Break the Norm Leadership, and today we're talking about leading innovation in self and others. Now, I want to make sure we're clear at the start about what kind of innovation we're talking about.
Mhm.
Um, Not talking about the eureka type moment of innovation, where the lightning strikes you and you have some unplanned burst of genius, not the falling apple from the tree that hits you on the head. I'm talking more about a predictable and repeatable innovation process, one that requires some discipline, but that can really help you be more productive in your personal life or in your work life. And the question often comes up, is innovation an art or is it a science? And I've worked with performing artists, I've worked with aerospace engineers, so I hope you'll believe me when I say that innovation is both. It's both an art and a science. And in fact, that whole art science argument is really a false dichotomy. I've seen, well, although there are undoubtedly exceptions, generally speaking, professional artists are incredibly disciplined and professional scientists are incredibly creative. But that's a lunch and learn for another day. Let's get into how to lead innovation in self and others today. And here's the plan. I want to make sure I define innovation so that we're all on the same page. I want to walk you through three generic steps for how you can lead innovation. And then I'll end with some ideas for you to consider as you're innovating, perhaps to help you make your innovation process a little bit more smooth. And I'll also include in that consideration section one of my favorite all time approaches for generating innovative insights. There are many different ways of doing it. This is just one of my favorites. So that's the plan for today. Let's get into it. First, innovation is the ability to create and carry out new ideas. And those could be incremental ideas, evolutionary ideas, or revolutionary ideas. And the takeaway I want you to take from that definition is that innovation doesn't have to be the next best thing since sliced bread every single time. It doesn't have to be a huge paradigm shifting change or improvement. Um, I was recently reminded that all organizations, at their core, all of an organization's activities fall into one of four buckets. The organization is either trying to grow revenue, it's trying to grow profit, it's trying to grow productivity, be more efficient, or it's trying to grow experience, like grow the customer experience. Organizations are always doing one or more of those four things. And all four of those things require innovation. Whether you're an entrepreneur running your own business or an intrapreneur, an employee within a large organization where you might need to develop new products or new services for your business or business unit. Now, what I found, or what we found at Break the Norm Leadership, is that innovation really requires four different competencies or proficiency with four different competencies. You need to be able to collaborate because rarely will you implement an innovation all on your own. You need to be able to experiment because rarely is the first idea the best idea. Think of it more like your 20th or 30th or 40th idea is going to be your best idea, which means, and pardon, you as a innovator, you need to be willing to shift your perspective or able to shift your perspective. Just don't think of what you need as the developer, but put yourself in the shoes of your customer or other clients. And then lastly, for this whole process of innovation, we don't talk about it enough. It really requires a lot of resilience because you're going to get it wrong a bunch of the time, wrong in quotation marks, a bunch of the times. You're going to come up with possible solutions that don't meet your goals, that don't solve the challenge, that don't address the need, but you have to find a way to keep going. For me, if I keep learning, it makes it easier to keep going. I learned something from that experiment or that trial or that attempt. Maybe all I learned was not, what not to do, but hopefully I learned something a little more that I can apply to the next iteration of innovation. All right, so now that we got clear about what we're talking about, innovation as an incremental, evolutionary, or revolutionary activity, let's talk about the three big steps. First, the first step Arguably, the most important step in leading innovation comes long before the need for innovation comes up or even a problem might be recognized. You have to make it safe for you and for others to innovate. Innovation doesn't happen if people feel threatened or feel uncomfortable or feel unsafe. And when it comes to psychological safety in the workplace, it's not helpful to think of it as an on-off switch that, where like people, everyone's safe or no one's safe, everyone's safe or no one's safe. Not so helpful. It's better to think, or more helpful to think of psychological safety as levels, where there are levels to it, where each higher level means employees feel safer than they did in the level before. And as a result of feeling safer, they're able to unlock capabilities that were not accessible to them in previous levels because they were so focused on defense or protection. So let me talk through the four levels. Level one, this is the inclusion level where people feel like it's safe for me to be here because there's a lack of physical threats and a lack of emotional threats. Then you get to level two, where it's safe to learn here, which means it has to be okay to make mistakes, or at least make mistakes where, as a result, you're not ridiculed, where you're not punished, or where you're not fired. The level above that is level three of psychological safety, and that's where it's safe to add value here. And that essentially means that people feel like they can bring their full self to work, and or bring their full self to the work, pardon, and that they can use all of their talents. Now, I put full in quotation marks because I'm one of those people who believes that no one should bring their full self to work. I'm a controlling introvert with stranger danger who often feels like he's always right. And nobody at work signed up for me to bring that full self. Um, People at work signed up for my best self. Only the other Mr. Pierre, who I married, deserves the full me. So at level three, people are really bringing the best of themselves to work, but they're also bringing all of their talents because sometimes people don't feel safe enough to be a little extra or do a little extra or help other people out or show all the things they can do because it doesn't feel safe to show all their cards. But at level three, people feel comfortable showing all their cards, which means all of their talents, all of their skills, all of their interests. And all of those are needed for innovation. And then you get to level four of psychological safety. And that's the one that's critical for innovation because in level four, where it's safe to be creative, the creative process involves breaking some things, whether that's breaking rules, breaking sacred cows, things that we thought could never be changed before. So you have to get to that level where you can think outside of the box and have it feel like that's going to be okay, that you're not going to be punished, ridiculed, or fired for doing that. And the example I often use with folks is something that I had to learn over time: brainstorming. I used to think that team brainstorming was a pretty mild, not even risky activity. But what I've learned over time, watching different teams attempt brainstorming, or teams that I've led attempt brainstorming, is that brainstorming really requires level four psychological safety because to think outside the norm, to think outside the box or the unwritten rules of an organization, you really have to be willing to break things and it has to be safe enough for you to feel like you can break the things, whether things are the status quo, um, the way we normally do things around here, or just examples of how things have worked in the past. So level four safety is required, in my experience, to really make innovation, whether that's my innovation or the innovation others, a repeatable, disciplined, and predictable process. So set the stage first for innovation. That's step one. Once you've set the stage, then you really want to frame the space where innovation is going to happen. And what I mean by frame the space is that you want to identify what are the requirements that whatever innovation I'm going to come up with has to meet. What are the one, two, three to 10 or whatever number of things I want this innovation to be able to do or problems I want it to solve. I also, in terms of framing the space, want to frame any relevant constraints, like the solution can't do X, Y, and Z, but I want it to do A, B, and C. You're basically framing the box where you'll do design. So it's not a matter of boiling the ocean. When you're trying to innovate, you're just trying to boil a pot of water, and the framing defines the space where that pot of water will exist. I know it's popular to say it's important to think outside the box, but in my experience working with some very creative, very innovative folks on both the performing arts and the engineering end, being creative in a disciplined and repeatable way requires that you stay inside the box or at least define what the box is. It's the process of taking a huge, vague problem and making it manageable. So let me give you an example. Actually, let me talk you through the other three bullets here. You want to transform the problem that you have into a challenge. You want to identify all the requirements, all the constraints, all the parameters, and then you want to clarify your timeline, like how much time you literally have to come up with the innovation. Because your innovative process that you're going to work next in step three, if you only have an hour, your process may look very different than the process you would use if you have days or weeks or months. Let me give you an example of a changing a problem into a challenge, an innovation challenge. I might have a situation where I need to reduce the amount of time it takes me to commute from my home in Baltimore to my workplace in Washington, D.C. So I want a solution that reduces I may identify the requirements first. I need a solution that will reduce my commute time to under 30, let's say under 60 minutes or less. I need it to work consistently, whether it's rainy or sunny outside. I need it to not increase my current commuting costs. I don't want to break the bank with my new solution, and I want it to involve minimal impact, like no jetpacks, nothing crazy like that. I will also outline all the constraints. I need it to follow the laws of physics, so no imaginary teleportation to my place of work. I need it to acknowledge my personal preferences. Like for me, I don't like waking up before 7 a.m., so I need a way to get to work taking that into consideration. And I need it to work with existing roads, existing infrastructure. So there I just turn my problem of I can't get to work on time into a challenge. Give me a solution that meets all four of my requirements and still operates within all three of my constraints. That's the space that I've defined for my innovation. And that's the step two in coming up with a repeatable, a disciplined, innovative process. Then we get to step three. And step three is where you want to actually implement your innovation process. There are a lot of processes out there. I like the folks at IDOU in terms of their process, but I'm process agnostic. Whatever works for you, if you like it, then I love it. But generally speaking, what we've seen at Break the Norm Leadership is that all processes have four generic steps, and this is the generic model on this slide here. That first you generate. This is ideating different possibilities, different options, different alternatives. Different processes use different language, but you're basically trying to generate a whole lot of possible ways to meet your solution inside the box you defined in the previous step. Then after you generate, you want to choose. And that's where you identify one option, but usually you identify a small subset of all your options that you want to just explore a little further to see if they might still stay within your innovation box, your innovation frame, in terms of meeting your goals, your requirements, but also recognizing your constraints. Then you get to step three in the process, which is develop. That's where you fully develop one, maybe two different options that you chose from the previous phase. So you generated, then you chose a subset of those different options, and then you're finally going to develop one or more of them before you move to the last step where you actually execute it, where you take that solution that you've created out of all the options you generated and you execute it. You put it into action and you see if it produces the results that you wanted to produce. So in my example, I would create a whole bunch of options for how I might get to work in under an hour and such. And I pick one, I'll try it out and see if it works. If it does work, hooray. If it doesn't, I might want to tweak it or go back to my large list of options and see if there's a different option that I want to pursue and develop. again, with the huge number of innovation processes, you can pick, there are many right ways to innovate, but generally speaking, we've seen all ways of innovating, all processes have this same generic formula. Now, while you're innovating, there are some things that I think it would be really helpful for you to keep in mind. And I've stolen these from a number of different experiences and sources. So the first one is you want to populate the cemetery of bad ideas. And this is a concept I learned during an interview I did with Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen from NASA. Um, he did a study of large NASA projects. Projects both large in terms of scope, large in terms of dollar amount, and also large in terms of how long the projects lasted. And what he found was time and time again, when large projects got off track, when they slipped their schedule and were running late, or when they blew their budget and were going over cost, um, to get them back on schedule, the team used some idea that was mentioned way back in the beginning when the project was first being developed, when they were framing that space in which the project was gonna operate. And back then, these ideas were bad ideas in quotation marks because the technology didn't exist or they were way too expensive or impractical. But what Dr. Zurbuchen found time and time again is that as long as you held on to all of those ideas that were generated at the start of the project about how you might meet the demands of the solution within the constraints that you'd identified, that if you held on to all of those ideas, especially the bad ones, one or more of them was going to save your butt or save the project's butt later on. So the lesson I took from him is collect as many bad ideas in that generation, ideation, brainstorming phase of innovation as you possibly can. Because when things go wrong, your answer or your solution might be in that cemetery of bad ideas. So that's number one, the number one consideration I want you to keep in mind. Number two is really, I was gonna say struggle because it's a struggle for me, but work hard to maintain your discipline. I have a temptation that while I'm brainstorming, if my third idea seems like a really good idea, like it seems to check all the boxes in terms of all of my requirements and doesn't violate any of my constraints, I want to go for that idea right away. I want to start developing it. I want to try and execute it. And time, I've learned that the first idea you fall in love with is not the best idea to choose. Keep going, keep brainstorming. Don't try and just brainstorm 5 options. Try and brainstorm 50 options before you get to the choosing phase. So stick to your discipline and don't rush to implementing a solution out of a small pool of options. Don't rush the process, but make sure you stick to your timeline. If you know you have an hour, make sure you stick to that hour. If you know you have a week, stick to the week. And then on the rest of this slide, I have one of my favorite innovation processes, and perhaps it's because of where it came from. It comes from Liz Lerman. She might not be a name that you're familiar with. She's an author. I first knew of her as a choreographer in the DC area. She is a MacArthur Fellow, one of the Genius Grants recipients. And I just love the way that she, in very simple, plain language, has broken down a process where you can take an idea or a notion or a concept and brainstorm about it in creative ways. I like that this gives some guidance to people who struggle with brainstorming. Take, how do I generate 50 ideas quickly? And so I'll just talk you through each one of these. Rattle around in someone else's universe. This is about changing perspective. Like perhaps you'll come up with different ideas or more ideas if you take yourself out of your shoes and put yourself into somebody else's shoes. That's what I think she's really trying to say. Embrace the paradox. Hold two ideas in your head at once. Find something to respect at both ends of the spectrum. This is really about maintaining a growth and open mindset, particularly during the open periods, the beginning periods of innovation. Instead of getting married to one idea or another, or one extreme or another, hold on to both and recognize that there's some value in both of these things and in the space in the middle. I used to have a professor who would talk about how our problems could change us, but only if we held the tension of the problems long enough that they changed us instead of us rushing to solve our problems and then moving on to the next thing. And I think Liz is talking about the same dynamic here, that when human beings hold on to paradox, our brains, which I believe are innate problem solvers, might find connections or ways to combine things that wouldn't normally happen if we like recognize that two things are hard to reconcile or in conflict with one another and just wanted to drop them. But if we hold on to them, magic can happen. Magic in the form of new connections, new innovations. Uh, Point three, recognize that originality isn't the whole story. Copy, make variations, develop. Um, it says diversity, but it should say diversify. Apologies for that. And here, I think what Liz is saying is that it's okay to build off of something else. There's a fallacy, I think, that all innovation must start with a blank slate. We've already sort of cracked that by saying you need to frame the problem space, frame the space in which innovation will happen. I think the other thing that Liz is saying is you can actually take some other idea and pull it apart or build on top of it in order to come up with new and different ideas. Maybe those ideas are other brainstorming that people on your team have done. Maybe they're existing products or services, but don't feel like you have to start from a blank page. And then here she starts giving some advice about what you can do with um, other products or other ideas that you are importing into your process. You can make them bigger. You can make them smaller. Those are just two ideas on how you can change something in a way that might spark some innovation in you. Then she says, turn discomfort into inquiry. And that's what we did at the start. We turned a problem into a challenge, I can't get to work on time to how could I get to work on time? That's the shift you want to make. And then think inside the box. Let limitations spark inspiration. So here she's referring not to the same thing that I said earlier about framing the problem, but more about like if you really lean into the constraints, um, humans are amazingly adaptive and able to find ways to manage with less. So don't always think that adding resources, like if we had this, this, and this, then we could do that, that, and that. Sometimes saying, oh, if we only had these things, we'd have to MacGyver a situation together or MacGyver a solution together. So sometimes necessity proves to be the mother of invention. And then lastly, add meaning and subtract meaning. And I'm having drawing a blank on exactly how she refers to that. I'll have to look it up during the Q&A section. But again, all of these are what I think are really creative ways to approach innovation in a disciplined manner where you're going to get results every single time. All right. So that's our quick talk about how to inspire innovation in self and others. It really boils down to three big steps. It boils down to setting the stage, framing the innovation space, and then implementing whatever innovation process works for you. All right. With that said, I want to take some time because we have a few minutes left to open it up for questions. You can drop things in the chat, or if you want, you can take yourself off mute and I'm happy to talk to you live. What questions do people have?
I have a question.
Please.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Jacqueline, and generally on the team, I am not leading the conversation of the innovation. Although I am a good populator of the cemetery of bad ideas, and I feel safe, to do that. But is there another way to, as a participant, to direct the um, innovation conversation? I guess I would call it that.
Oh, got it. Let me make sure I understand the question. And Jacqueline, is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah. So you want to know, like, if you're not leading the innovation process, what other roles might you or anyone play in that process to be supportive?
that's right.
Ooh, good question. I'm happy to take advice from the audience if you want to drop things in the chat. But in my experience, I would say there are probably two roles in particular that I think are really helpful. Maybe three. Let me see if I can get these. So first, leading the conversation. I want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. Are you talking about the person who's sort of framing the problem, or the person who's driving the process, or both?
Yeah, I guess the project is not really my project. I'm not the project lead, but I'm just a participant in the conversation from week to week. Um, and so I don't really get to drive how the conversation happens,
Hmm.
but
Okay.
I ask I mean, I don't want to call them stupid questions, but I ask a lot, I'll ask questions, which like it, populates I'm good at populating the cemetery.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. This is good. One that's a critical, I think, role to play. I often call that the skeptic on a team, but I mean skeptic in the most positive sense. Like, this is the person
mhm,
who asks. I know we like to, or people often say dumb questions, but I will say like beginner questions, or first mind question, or novice questions, but those often get at critical assumptions. So having that person on the team, so someone driving who's sort of in charge of the process. Here's the process we're going to run through. We have this much time. Having a timekeeper or facilitator in that sense, I think, is a critical role. Having that skeptic who's going to help the group ask questions, or think about things in a new way, like ask why or how, or if you can ask why in a non-judgmental way. And then the other role, those are two of the roles. I think the third role that I've seen be most helpful is, I'll call them a scribe, but not in the generic sense of they're just notating what goes down. Somebody who's oh, you ever seen one of those visual note takers who, like, while a meeting
yeah.
is happen, yeah, someone who does that, but sort of on a let's say that's the varsity level. Like, let's go like below JV level. Like, somebody who does take the information that's shared in the meetings and tries to recombine it in ways or make new connections. Like, I just find that's really helpful, particularly when I'm driving a process, to know that there's someone in the room who's sort of capturing the essence of what we're talking about, but not in a linear fashion, because conversations don't often work that way, or good ideas don't follow that linear order. So I would say those are three ways. If you're not the sorry, those are two ways if you're not the lead, skeptic or scribe. Um, Forgive the rough language around those terms. I think those are two roles one could play, as well as being, oh, one more just occurred to me, like just being a foil, being a thought partner for the person leading the innovation. Because my experience is that most projects and most innovation involves large group, small group, large group, small group. Like, you go back and forth between that dynamic. And so, like, a group may be in a meeting, but after the meeting after the meeting, it might be really helpful if you are that foil, that mirror, that thought partner with the lead. I wonder if that's something you might be good at, especially given how you like to ask those beginner questions. Do you think any of that
Okay.
might be useful?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm just sort of noticing that the the conversations or brainstorming or meetings around innovating on ideas happen in a different way where I am. Um, Although it'll be sort of interesting, I guess, to sort of see how they follow these processes, and then, how can I play the best role in that? That's, I guess, the question that you just answered. But yeah, I'm also, the person that wanders around the hallways and asks more questions.
I love it. Although I know that in fast-paced business environments, that sometimes that can be frustrating for people, but I hope you won't stop doing it.
Oh, they're already used to me.
All right, fantastic. All right, we are at time, so I'm going to stop. Break the Norm Leadership. You can reach us at breakthenormleadership.com. You can see our schedule of upcoming Lunch and Learns under our section for professionals. Go to professionals, then Lunch and Learn. Our next Lunch and Learn is on one of my favorite topics of all time, imposter syndrome. Um, and I hope that I have earned the privilege of your time and attention today. Please have an awesome day. And if you can help somebody else, please help them too.